Welcome to Mindful Business, weekly discussions about mindfulness, entrepreneurship, and Web3. This live Twitter space is about an hour long. It's recorded and uploaded to YouTube to be played back anytime in podcast format. This is episode 27, dedicated to discussing full and new moon rituals. And I am joined by my lovely co-host, Abby, the creator of Elevate, as usual. How are you doing today, Abby?
It's like a snow globe day here where I am. Like everything's been canceled. Everyone is home for the night. So it's a perfect night to pull up by my little cheesy electric fireplace, have my cozy robe on, and sit down and talk about some full moon and new moon intentions and rituals with you. So I'm feeling really good and really excited. How are you doing today, Sierra?
Sounds fantastic. I am drinking a nice cup of some ginger tea, so I'm also getting into my cozy vibes. I'm kind of resituating myself into my normal routine after going to the gem shows in Tucson this past weekend. That was so fun. If you're listening live, there's tons of videos and clips of all of the amazing crystals I saw there on our YouTube channel. And if you're already on our YouTube channel, they're under the YouTube Shorts section, which are like little video clips. What was so funny is that the Super Bowl was also in Arizona the same weekend I went to the gem shows, and I didn't realize until I got there, or I didn't realize until, yeah, after I got to the airport in Arizona, I kept wondering, like, why are there so many football fans, like so many Eagles fans on their way to the gem show? Like, what the hell is going on? Like, that's such like an eclectic interest for like all of these Eagles fans to like be coming out to the gem show. And then I got to Arizona and I realized that they were not going to the gem shows. They were going to the Super Bowl, which was happening in Glendale, which is apparently not too far away from Tucson. So I guess people were flying into the Tucson airport. But goodness gracious, I thought that was ridiculous and funny.
That's hysterical. And I would not have had a single clue. In fact, when I thought the Super Bowl had been the previous weekend, my birthday is February 4th. And for the last many, many years, Super Bowl has always been on my weekend. And I could give a shit about sports ball. So I had just assumed it had already happened. So much to my surprise, it was this past weekend. So I would have been in the same boat. And I think that's hysterical. Yeah, that doesn't seem like a big crossover of crowds. Although there's a whole renaissance going on with people being interested again in crystals and magic and moon rituals, for example. I feel like there are more and more people being turned on to it. I have teenagers at home, and I even when they were like, I don't know, preteens, I could see that them and their friends were starting to get interested in this stuff. And it was so funny to me because she's now 13, but when she was probably like 10, 11, and started kind of getting into her own witchy vibe, she kind of sheepishly started talking to me about it. And I like had to grandly gesture to my bookshelves and my all the witchy shit in this house that she just hadn't noticed before. So, and now she's kind of outgrown it. But anyway, I digress. I know that's what we're here to talk about a little bit, but I do find it interesting that there do seem to be more and more people turned on to this. And I think you and I have probably always been, I'm going to guess, and we've probably talked about it, but I'm going to guess you've probably always been enamored with the full moon, like I have been. I'm 47 years old and I still get the same sense of wonder and awe when I look at the full moon. I don't know. What about you?
Oh my goodness, yes. I'm also just like a super like earthy person. I have a lot of like earth energy, a lot of Virgo and Capricorn specifically in my chart. And I'm just like very, I mean, I guess duh, it would make sense why I work with crystals and cannabis. Like I'm just super into like natural stuff. And I have always felt like this sense of just, oh my goodness, every time I see a full moon or even a crescent moon, like a partial, I'm just like, whatever. It's just always so gorgeous and illuminating. Yes, I love it. And I have always loved it. And I've honestly always kind of had an alternative set of interests in terms of being into like the magical and mystical. But yes, we have a new moon in Pisces approaching very soon. I think it's in just a couple days. So I thought this space would be well timed to like talk about moon rituals. And you know what? I'm gonna pin a tweet for our for our live listeners. Let me see if I can figure out how to do this. There we go. I think I just got it up there. So we actually have a new moon in Pisces, like kind of like this list of crystals. Every month we make a list of crystals that we suggest working with for both the full and new moon, and we share it across all of our social media channels. Obviously, I've talked about this a lot in like our previous crystal healing spaces, but like it's a very personal and intuitive thing in terms of choosing crystals, and these recommendations are like just suggestions, and you should always trust yourself and your gut and your intuition. And by all means, like this is not the end all be all of like the only crystals that you can work with during this new moon. So I do want to give this disclaimer and just say like it's a safe space to use whatever crystals you want. But these are just some suggestions, my friends. So yeah, let's get into it. Like moon rituals, like why does the full and new moon rituals, like why are these even a thing? Why do people feel like we're connected with the moon? And why have people always felt this way since ancient times? The moon has always been very sacred and represented typically like kind of the divine feminine and the emotional body or subconscious, kind of since the beginning of any type of spirituality. It's always been very significant. And I guess in more recent times with science and innovation, we've come to learn that the moon has a lot of influence over our biological rhythms, not only us as humans, but all living creatures that we share this planet with. So what do you think, Abby? Like, what do you think in terms of why is the moon our focus today? And like, why are people so fascinated with it?
Well, as you said, if you think about all of these different traditions and lineages of spiritual paths from all around the world, it is something that seems to be a constant unifier of wherever it is, right? That these traditions and kind of esoteric knowledge is rooted in this because we all have that in common. We can all look at that night sky wherever we are, and that sense of wonder we all feel. There's this desire to know ourselves and to know the mysteries of the universe. And so I think it's only natural that we've been looking up and out, at the stars at night, at the moon, to try to make sense, of our humanity, but also to try to put our finger on and kind of touch that thing that's bigger than all of us. And so it's really something that I think is so inspiring, to think that we've all been looking at that same moon. I was just in Chicago and looking at architecture and kind of geeking out on like, fuck, this building has been here, for 200 years. But man, if you really zoom out and think about the moon and our obsession with the moon, I mean, every ancestor in your lineage, your mother's mother, all the way back to the first mother that there ever was, almost certainly had to feel that connection to the moon. I mean, look at our cycles, right? As women, our cycles are about every 28 days, 29 days. So is the moon. And we watch these phases of the moon, and it looks like a pregnant belly, right? As it goes through these cycles. So I think, it, as you said, it has this physiological, physical effect on humans and plants, but also on nature, right? The tides, and gravity and all these things, right, are connected to and affected by the moon. And I'll tell you, the thing that really first pulled my interest as a little kid, I know I've talked about the Time Life series books before. That was one thing. But on a little bit more practical level, and I don't think we have talked much about this in some of our podcasts, and I was curious to ask you about the Farmer's Almanac. The Farmer's Almanac I got turned on to as a kid because my dad loved gardening. We had this huge 1 acre garden. And the Farmer's Almanac has a lot of like gardening by the moon tips in their catalog. Now it's all online. I'm sure there's still a printed catalog. I don't know. But it got even deeper. It would be like best days to cut your hair and things along this line, all tied into astronomy and the phases of the moon. And it was really that place that kind of helped me understand what the different phases were. And from there, and just my same as you kind of eternal kind of intrigue with the enchanted, with the mystical, right? Between the Farmer's Almanac, which sounds kind of nerdy, but that and those Time Life books, boy, I was really on the search to figure out, being a little witch at like age 13. So that's kind of where mine sparked. And kind of a long-winded answer to why I think we've all been looking at that moon and so connected with it. But what about you? What's your path to the moonlight, Ben?
Path to the Moonlight. Oh my goodness. Yes. Well, there, first of all, so much good stuff. Like, it is incredibly interesting how, as women, our cycles do tend to align with a new or full moon. And many of us aren't even aware of it. It just like happens. And then when you do become consciously aware of it, it's like, oh wow, like it's just so, it's incredible how influential the moon is. And that's so cool. I was super into like all types of, not only like rocks, and I was super into outer space. There was a period of time I wanted to be an astronaut, and I was super into just like learning about the planets. And then interestingly enough, I saw a picture of what the Earth looks like from the moon, and I was like, oh hell no. I was like, that's no. This is cool to look at like on the page, but like my ass is not going that far away from this planet. And it freaked me out. And then that was the end of that hope and dream of me wanting to be an astronaut. But I say that to just say I was just super interested in outer space and like what's out there, and just this sense of wonder. I grew up in a small city, so the Farmer's Almanac was not something I came across until I was well into adulthood. It's just we didn't really do any gardening or any planting, so like it's just not something I became familiar with until moving out on my own. But yeah, I'm full and new moon. It's like I feel like, especially when people are just getting acquainted to the moon cycle, I guess the lunar cycle, it can be, it can be confusing in terms of like, these are two significant times during the lunar cycle, but it's like, what does it mean and what's the difference? And I felt like today would be a good time to like really dig into that. So okay, so I'll start with full moon and then new moon, and then we'll kind of, we'll just naturally flow and see where we go. But full moon, when the moon is bright and illuminated. So like when you see it in the sky, like this is when the werewolves are coming out and howling. This is the end of the lunar cycle, and a lunar cycle is typically, around like 29-30 days. It's believed that like toward the end of the lunar cycle, this is a kind of an energetic shift where things are kind of generally more, it's more of a releasing energy, making it like a good time to figure out what's no longer serving you and kind of set intentions to release and to let things go. It's really considered a time of completion and release. The time of the new moon, on the other hand, or the dark moon, this is literally when the moon's surface looks dark because the illuminated side is facing away from the earth. This is a time kind of like the opposite, where it's more so a time of new beginnings. And this is the time at the beginning of the lunar cycle. So it's kind of this initiation type of energy. It's a good time to like start new projects, like make a list of goals, like get super clear on like what's working good for you. So it's interesting because the lunar cycle, just like life and just like everything, isn't it interesting how everything in the world is just so perfectly and beautifully and naturally balanced. You have like both sides of the coin within the same month. You have like these two incredible opportunities for like self-reflection and personal growth. And I just find that to be quite a beautiful kind of yin yang in terms of like the energetic landscape of every month of every year. What do you think, Abby?
Really beautifully said. And as you're talking, you're right, it made me think of the words ebb and flow. It's nature has this beautiful way of reminding us of these ebbs and flows, and that is that a natural rhythm and cycle. And because it moves in literally a rhythmic cycle, right? If we tune into it, we can find opportunities for balance in our own lives. And you're right, these two opportunities, the new moon and full moon, are almost like two sides of a coin in their energies. They each feel almost opposite in their energies, but can be really used together, right? If you are good about, not good, that's not the best way to say that. If you happen to be intentional about working with these energies and you do it consistently, you'll find that maybe seeds of intention you planted on a new moon 6 months ago, right? You can work with that full moon energy 6 months later, to try to, or at the very least, if you're not trying to manifest it, to check in with where those things are, right? I like following these rhythms because it gives us the opportunity to check in, to kind of audit ourselves, audit our lives, feel like we at least have some sense of control even though we don't, right? It feels like there are things we can check in with and be this um intuitive guide in our own lives. I love that the new moon is that, as you said, it's the dark of the moon. It's that time where we really plant those seeds of intention. It's a better time if you're gonna start a new project, you're gonna want to do it on new moon, not full moon, right? It's a great time to meet new people, to be open to meeting new people, starting those new chapters. And I love that. And I love that there's a kind of monthly reminder to do that on a small scale or on a big scale. We all love that full moon. It's bright, it's in our faces, it's in our eyes. Sometimes though, it can feel like chaos to people or too much, or if you feel really sensitive to those things, as you said, what a wonderful time to think more about grounding and releasing, and kind of checking in on how things are manifesting. I think too about, since they are sort of opposite energies, full moons bringing to light everything that's been beneath the surface. Sometimes you might need a little bit of darkness. You might need to find yourself blanketing yourself or something, if it's too much. I bet it's one of your favorite times to charge crystals. I know it is for myself. And I might be getting ahead of myself to getting into rituals and stuff. But yeah, I love what you said. It's there's this monthly opportunity, a couple times a month, right? If you work with these energies. So I love that.
Oh, I love it too. And I love having these chats with you because I can really dork out about all of this stuff that I'm super interested in and that people always ask me about, honestly. When I tell people I have a crystal store, I get all types of questions. What crystal is best for this? And when and how do I charge a crystal? Just, I feel like these podcasts are just fun and then also informative and kind of give people the lay of the land. So I love this, Abby. But anywho, yes, opportunities for balance. I love that you said that. And yeah, working with both the initiation and completion energies of the cycle, it's really the cycle of life, like birth and death, beginning and end. And it's incredible how we see like the same kind of macro pattern. We see it on a micro level with all of the kind of natural things that we encounter in the world, and the lunar cycle is no different. It's this cycle. But yes, I love that you mentioned charging crystals. Let's definitely talk about some like popular moon rituals. We can start with the full moon, because the full moon is usually like the most recommended way to cleanse and charge crystals. When the full moon is at its peak, they say cleansing and charging potentials are at their strongest. So oftentimes people will kind of maybe leave them out the night before until the day after and really let it soak up all the juices. As we were mentioning earlier, this is like really an energy of like completion and release, and it also is a time to like consider what crystals you're charging and cleansing, because the attributes of the crystals will be amplified, um, and any negative or dense energy they've accumulated will kind of be removed with the releasing energy of the full moon. um, there you can cleanse and charge any of your crystals in the full moon. It's not like certain ones, like you can't do that with. Any crystal is suitable to go and hang out in the moon and take a moon bath. For example, like if you've been struggling with like self-acceptance or gratitude, maybe you'll put your rose quartz out there, kind of like amplifying being receptive to unconditional love and like allowing space for gratitude. Maybe if you've been having a lot of like negative interactions with other people lately for some reason, you might want to put your black tourmaline out there to kind of ward away that negativity and kind of maximize the protective attributes. So you can cleanse and charge any of your crystals in the moon. We have some really awesome like free articles and blogs on our website. We have a few about how to clean and program crystals. We have a few about full and new moon rituals. So, like, if you're listening to this and you're more of a reader and not a listener, please feel free to check our site out and see those. But tell me about your own full moon and crystal rituals. Abby, what do you like to do?
First of all, I want to say I love and adore how many resources you have available. You have put so much work and intention into creating all of these different correspondences, resources. I love that you do that, and I really appreciate that because once upon a time, it was hard to figure this stuff out. And I think for whether you're a new fledgling kind of witch or a person on your spiritual path, it can be really overwhelming sometimes and confusing. And there's now there's a fuck ton of all kinds of weird information out there, and it can be hard to know, hey, is this a reliable source or whatever it is. And I know that you know your shit and that you've been doing this for a long time. So I love how many resources you have available. And I just wanted to comment on that. I was going to comment on when I kind of jumped from Farmer's Almanac in my early oh, I don't know, early 20s. I discovered Eileen Holland. And I don't know if we've talked about her before in the podcast, but she wrote a book in 2000 called The Wiccan Handbook. It's been updated, I think, in the last 10 years. But in the back of that book, she had a link you could look up. This is like early, like 2000. So this is way back, way back. I know I always bring some ancient technology to the conversation, like CDs, but there was an online community that she had called Open Sesame. And this is before like Facebook and things like that. And I was on there, and and she had written about correspondences, and I didn't know what that meant. But what you do is kind of similar. It's like a list of resources, like use this stone and this herb and this deity and this color and this planet. These are the things that correspond to whatever your intention might be. And finding that, when I found her in my early 20s, it helped click things into place for me so that I could figure out how to do full moon rituals, for example, how I could write my own intentions and spells and things along that line. So I say that because that was on my list of things to talk about. But to link that back to what you're doing now, it's really important work because if any of us are going to figure out, how to do more of this kind of soul expansion, right? Soul expanding work. It's important that we have people creating those resources for us along the way. So I haven't even answered the question yet. Full moon rituals. Definitely, as you said, charging crystals in the full moon. and being intentional about which crystals so that they can be cleansed and charged. I think is a big deal. I like to make a little moon water, things along that line. I do love grounding exercises. So if it's that time of year that you can be outside doing barefoot things, I love to be able to either be seated or have my feet on the actual little literal ground in a full moon. And we're not too far off from it. It's hard to imagine on snowy day like today, but it's literally just around the corner, to be able to do things like that. Releasing ceremonies or rituals where I'm maybe physically writing things down and burning it. I've done, a lantern release, things where you're physically finding a way to represent this, like, I'm writing this down and I'm attaching it to this thing and I'm physically letting it go, can be very beautiful. Once upon a time, I used to host full moon mantra meditations in my yoga studio. And that was always a neat way to kind of come together and link in your vibration with other people, and share that space. And everyone's kind of releasing their own stuff through their vibrations. But gosh, it always felt really, really cool to be able to do that. And so I'd love to find a way to get back to that one of these days. But yeah, finding ways that you can connect with, be gentle, ground, cleanse, and sort of start to make space, for those seeds of intentions you're going to plant on that next new moon, which I know we'll talk about next. And I won't get ahead of myself. I'll stop there, but I've got some notes to come back to.
Oh my God, I love how it's so Abby to bring up like a resource from 20 years ago that still hits. Like you always have like some like CD or cassette or like pre-social media piece of literature or media to share, and I'm so here for it because like who else is gonna give it to me? I love it. And like I love when a good piece like just stands the test of time, and it doesn't matter like how much time passed, like the information is just still relevant and resonant. Like that is just so powerful and incredible. But yeah, so many good things to do during the full moon. As you were chatting, I was pinning up for our live listeners and not the people who are going to play back on YouTube. I was just pinning up some tweets with just details around different ideas around full and new moon rituals, things that we've posted in the past. I love that you mentioned kind of like a release or a purge. Yes, the power of the purge. Like this is kind of, I'm thinking about like a full moon circle or like, but it doesn't have to be anything. Like well, I say that to say it doesn't have to be like this witchy, whimsical thing. Like you can dance it out, you can yell it out, you can run it out, you can walk it out, just as long as you're releasing. And, as we mentioned, the full moon is known for kind of its releasing capabilities. And, this is a great time to give your negative energy and thoughts and pent up emotions, just give it to the moon, just let it out, and this kind of helps you feel more balanced and more clear. It's also a great time to just like even throw away things that are just no longer serving you. And like when I say release and purge, I mean like everything. You can it's a great time to like do your spring cleaning of sorts. And or like some people like to write things down on a piece of paper and like burn it to release the negatively harbored energy. Obviously, like please do this safely, like don't burn your house down. And I would suggest if you're going to use crystals for like a release or a purge, there are some crystals that are super purifying and detoxifying and great for this. And one of them is malachite. Malachite is one of my favorite crystals. And like when I think of malachite, like it just has like this purge energy. It's just like, and it's also a heart chakra crystal. So it's like purging like all of the heart hurting all the heart hurting stuff that's coming up as you're doing this release. So I love malachite for like a purge and release. But what do you think, Abby? Like, do you have any, power of the purge stories or tips in terms of like how you like to release?
As I mentioned, I love that when I can to get out and connect with nature. I've done some really cool visualization type of things. Once upon a time, and if we're going to throw it back to cassette days and CDs, doing things like balloon releases, I felt was really powerful. But in recent times, we've come to understand that's not always the best for Mother Earth and for environmentally. So instead, I've done visualization, right, meditations where we're kind of releasing balloons but energetically and in our mind's eye. And I love my fuck it bucket types of things. I think that's really a lovely way to kind of energetically purge. And I always find them to be that much more powerful on a full moon when it's like I'm really ready to release. As I said, I always think of full moon energy as like bringing to light that which has been bubbling beneath the surface for the last month, right? Leading up to that day. And so it's a really great time to lean into that, to sort of pull back the veil, let those emotions come up and out. Better out than in, as our friend Shrek always says. And I am a firm believer of that. So, I love the writing and the burning, or, writing letters you may not actually ever send to someone and shredding it later. But it's I think important to find some physical act. I love that you said dance it out, that it doesn't have to be witchy shit, right? It's you could put on, your favorite rage fucking metal or rage whatever and dance your ass off or holler. Um write those letters and make snowball, crumple them up and throw them, in your fuck it bucket. Like I definitely feel a physical shift in my energy, in my perception, like internally in my heart space, that heart mind field of consciousness. I feel it get lighter and brighter when I do those things, and especially on a full moon when it's just the right opportunity to do it. Right. It's also a good reminder, just on a practical sense, if we get into this routine of ritual by nature, by definition, right, is this thing we do with some sort of regularity, with some sort of maybe not hard commitment, but a mild commitment to do this on some sort of a regular basis. It's a reminder for us to check in and to make room. If we are holding on to a bunch of shit all the time, right, and we don't make a habit of purging and releasing, then guess what? There is no room for all of the new stuff, all of the new energy, all of the abundance, the blessings that are just waiting to come into our lives. There's no room for them to come if our arms are full of all the bullshit we've been carrying for the last month. So full moon is such a great reminder of I can put this stuff down and release it, so that I am open and receptive to all the stuff that I'm going to plant in the new moon, to come my way, right?
Yes, yes, yes. I love that you mentioned a balloon release ritual. Someone has to have made like some biodegradable balloons by now. I do totally understand in terms of the environmental concerns and impact, but like someone has to have addressed that issue by now, surely. And yes, we talked about your fuck it bucket meditation and our meditation space recently. Which if you missed that, you can find it on our YouTube. We record all of these spaces and put them on YouTube. That's essentially this kind of visualization meditation that Abby does, where like you literally just like see yourself in your mind, just like throwing things into what she describes as a fuck it bucket, which is literally a bucket full of all of your issues, worries, anxieties, fears, anything that's been causing you any dis-ease or discomfort. You're just tossing everything in there, and it is such a purge and such a release. So I love that you mentioned that. Absolutely, yes. You also touched on, I think, making moon water, which you can use for so many things. You can use it for like watering your plants or doing your witchy rituals, or you can even use it for like cleaning or all types of stuff. And to make water, all you have to do is like leave a jar of water under the full moon. It's not like there's no gatekeeping here, there's no like secret science to it. Like it's all you have to do. Sometimes people say like you should use distilled water, but like I don't know, I think I personally like to use rainwater. And by doing this, you allow the moon to kind of charge the memory of the water. And it's really interesting. Like you can look online, there's a lot of interesting information out there about how water, like, has a memory. And by memory, I don't mean like, this happened when I was 5 years old, but I mean like water can be programmed, which is interesting. So whatever, that's a conversation for another podcast episode, and I do encourage you to like look into it if you're interested. But essentially, you charge your water, and you then can make it like a powerful tool in your self-care kit, and you can add like herbs and crystals and salts and essential oils and all types of things. So absolutely. Something else I like to do during the full moon, Abby, is review my journal. And I don't know if you're a journaler, but I like to like kind of go back and revisit some of my old writing from earlier in the month and kind of just like really take a better look at like where I've grown or where I'm kind of staying stagnant. Um, and kind of I'm super dorky, and I like to like take different colored pens and like write different things. And but honestly, overall, just like it's fun, and it helps me like be honest with myself like during these processes. So what about you, Abby? Do you like to like do you journal? And if so, do you like to kind of go back and audit your writing sometimes?
I have to say it is so you. I love this. It is so you to go back with colored pens to like make new notes on your former journals. I love that. That is so you. So Virgo, so you. For years and years and years, I journaled as a little bitty kid for so long. And I did start to get away from it, when I got really busy with motherhood and kids being little. I turned to like blogging and then vlogging and things like that along the way. And I'd like to say, oh, I need to get back to it. I do write a little bit here and there, but I do a lot less of it, and I'm more inclined instead of journaling to do maybe something more creative. A more physical representation of what my thoughts might be, and that might be a physical practice. That might be, like moving through some things on my mat or meditation, or just creating stuff, which I've enjoyed getting back to. When I first came to the NFT space, I was so into making art, and then I became the founder of a project and stopped making art altogether. But I'm finding myself really loving getting back to just more creative play. So I would say I do more of that, rather than journaling itself. But I love that you do that. I think that is so you.
It is so me. And it would be even more me if I said I had like a spreadsheet and like and a Google Calendar. And yeah, that's very me. And it's very you to like have a more kind of like body based and like creative expression. Like you are an octopus at heart. You're just an octopus in a human body. But goodness gracious, time flies when you're having fun. We only have like 20 minutes left, and we haven't even touched on new moon. So we definitely have to chat also about new moon rituals, the other side of this kind of yin yang of like initiation and release throughout the lunar cycle. New moon for me, and it's interesting because we mentioned like release and purge and get rid of things and let it go, but like interestingly enough, with the kind of new beginning and fresh start and initiation energy of the new moon, I also feel like the new moon for me, and I guess it works out because it's twice a month, full moon, new moon, is also a good time I feel to like clean your space. Or maybe again, this is just like my Virgo shit, but like, I don't know, like cleaning your space can also become a way to like declutter your mind and allow new and beneficial energy into your life. And Abby kind of mentioned this, like if you're hanging on to a bunch of stuff, you don't have any room to be receptive for anything new. So I feel like cleaning your space up or like sprucing it up, even if it's just like adding some incense, lighting a candle, like putting certain crystals around the house in areas that promote their energy, or like whatever, even just having a nice bath to cleanse your body, which is its own temple. Cleaning or reorganizing your sacred space is like such a great way to just like align with your higher self and find balance and clear out old energy and make room for new opportunities and growth. What do you think, Abby?
I love exactly the last part that you said, your sacred space, because that's in my notes to talk about. I love, especially on new moon energy, as you said, it's this new beginning, right? It's this kind of almost introspective time to really, yes, bring in new fresh energy, being open to the new, new starts. So I love that you said sacred space. I think it's a great time to kind of reset your altar space, with those correspondences that we talked about, that correlate with the season. We're talking about new and full moon, and they always kind of have similar energy each time they come around, but each month is going to be influenced by whatever astrological sign or house is happening and the seasons. And those things are going to kind of flavor, right, those individual energies that are already there for the new moon. It's a great time to kind of cleanse your stuff on your altar space and set it for what, like we've got new moon in Pisces coming up, spring's around the corner next, thinking about shifting out and cleansing the space, and kind of reorganizing it or changing out your candle colors. If you use candles on your ritual space, I tend to think an altar space or sacred space, it's nice to have some representation of all of the elements. So you'll often find in my little altar spaces crystals, incense, candle, some sort of water, whether it be moon water, right? Usually it's going to be, in my witchy little house. If you work with deity energies at all, those might also be on that altar space. And you might have some things that stay all of the time. But I do think new moon's a great time when you are setting intentions for the month ahead, the weeks ahead, whatever the energy of the astrological season is, kind of tapping into work with that, I think it is a great way to amplify your efforts, your intentions. And so kind of sprucing up the altar space it's fun, it feels good, and it kind of shifts your awareness into that new beginning, like, okay, I'm ready to start that manifestation towards whatever it is I'm working on, whether it's this day, this month, or maybe it's something bigger, right, this season. So yes, I'm more inclined to think about a small space, like, you know, um, whereas the like the deep cleans and things are gonna, I guess, I don't know that I've ever really been intentional with it around the new moon. I'll have to pay more attention to see if when I get those urges and surges, if it's around that time. But I do know setting the altar space itself, I think a new moon energy is just, the perfect time to do that. I think too, I did, even though I'm not that big on journaling anymore, I do think if you are, like, maybe it's the great time to buy that shiny new journal or set yourself up with a new one. I must have it in the back of my mind that I want to do this. So maybe this new moon in Pisces is a perfect time, to start again. But if you're going to go out and start a new journaling practice, I think new moon energy is the perfect time to do that. Do you have like a little altar space, sacred space that you kind of shift out with the seasons, or does it kind of stay the same? Does that factor into your new moon rituals at all?
Yes, yes. I love that you mentioned sacred space. And I mentioned this earlier about all of our different articles and resources. But we do have a like how to create a sacred space article on our website as well. Which honestly, like, again, there is no tried and true. Like, you need to have one stick of incense and you need to have like one thing from your ancestors. Like, it really just boils down to like surrounding yourself with what makes you feel good, practicing your faith, honoring your ancestors, kind of just finding a peaceful place where you can limit distractions and just like get in touch with yourself, and like, a quiet area that you can devote to your spiritual practice, whatever that looks like. So yes, I do have a little altar. I have some stuff from my grandmother who passed, and like, some stuff from my mom, and just like little sentimental things, some crystals. I burn incense there. Sometimes I'll put fresh flowers there. So absolutely, I think it's beautiful to have a sacred space. And I also think it's beautiful just like how different people's sacred spaces will come to life. As I said, like, it doesn't have to look any specific way. And I think it's kind of incredible how everyone's sacred space can be so different. And yes, now is a definite, like, it's a great time. It's always a great time to journal, but like new moon is a fantastic time not only to like start a journaling practice, but just to like set intentions for the month. Like you don't have to set intentions for the month. Like the month prior, like you can wait until the full and new moon come and set intentions with that energy. um for the new moon specifically, this is like a time of new beginnings, and like maybe your intentions are to have a clear mind and to stay focused on your mission. And just like as each day progresses toward the full moon, you kind of have in mind that like you're working towards whatever this goal is or this higher purpose is, whether it's alignment or balance. And setting intentions is just a great way to like kind of check your own expectations as well. We kind of got to give ourselves guardrails at times. But yeah, setting intentions can also be paired with like specific crystals. Like I love using crystals to set intentions around the new moon. It's a great time to like swap out different crystals on your altar, as Abby was saying. I also like to meditate during the new moon. I mean, meditation is always like a great thing, no matter what time of day or season or moon phase. But I do feel like during the new moon, it's like an especially powerful time to meditate and to really harness that energy of initiation and really try and embody your intentions and goals. And I think meditating is a great thing to do this time as well. What do you think, Javi? Do you have any other practices that you like to do during the new moon?
I'm with you on meditation. I know you and I both have a regular meditation practice, but I do think there's, excuse me, something to be said about doing some specific work, right? On especially if you're doing anything around that new moon, if you're doing any other ritual, taking some time to meditate upon those things before or after or around, I think can kind of, again, amplify the effects, also just make you feel more in tune, more centered. So I do think that's a really beautiful thing to do in and around that new moon. We talked about journaling, but also like literally spell casting, right? Like it really is no different than setting intentions. If you're not comfortable with saying it in that way, but that's why it's called spell casting, is because when we have goals or dreams or visions or things that we want to see manifested, we want to see it come into life. We breathe life into it physically by writing it down. That's why it's called spell casting, because we write it down, we spell it out. And I think this is the most opportune time to literally spell out the desires of your heart. Spell out that thing that you are dreaming of. Spell out, and yeah, whether it's in a journal, I guess I don't journal so much, but spell it out somewhere. If maybe it looks like a Google Doc, which is probably more what it looks like in my world. I'm constantly, thinking of better ways to do my business or whatever it might be. In that way, I suppose I do journal it, and but it's looking to me more like intention setting, spell casting, business planning, right? All of those things. I think this is the time of the cycle that it's really most opportune to do those things. And then, that's why we tune into the seasons. Then if it is full moon, I'm not going to start the project. I'm not going to sign the contract. I'm not going to push for, the new deal or the arrangement or collaboration or whatever it is on a full moon necessarily, right? I'm going to do that more around that new moon time. I think that just kind of ties in with that being intentional, and utilizing, or leaning into the energies that we kind of have around us and what's going on. The more we tune into that, I think, the easier all of the things that we're going to do will flow. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I love a good spell. Spell casting, absolutely. Yeah, it's so interesting. I journal a lot and I never really thought of it as spell casting, but absolutely. And we kind of talked about this on a previous space where I was lamenting about how I'm always like journaling negative stuff. And like I recently came to a conclusion that it's like I need to like stop just like writing down like every like bad thing that's happened to me in my journal, and like make a point of like more deliberately like also tracking the good things that are happening, because my journal is just like such sad girl energy and I'm like casting the worst spells. But yes, like I mentioned, I like during the full moon to like review my journal. During the new moon, I like to like write in my journal and like put my experiences and thoughts down on paper. And it's interesting how when we write things down we can really like analyze our subconscious patterns and like really notice different triggers and feelings and common themes that are like coming up in our daily life. And just these realizations that we have from reflecting on our own writing can really like push us into such a propelled state of awareness and existence. Journaling is also just a great outlet to deal with things that you feel like you can't talk about, or things you can't control. And it's just a great way to keep tabs on your feelings and your thoughts and your energy levels. And I'm a big proponent of journaling. Interestingly enough, the new moon is typically a time when people, if for some reason it's always suggested to cleanse and charge your crystals during the full moon, but the new moon is not usually suggested as a time to do that. However, I do feel like the new moon is a good time to like reprogram your crystals with the intentions that you want to bring into the upcoming month. And that being said, your crystal should always be cleansed first. So, like, perhaps you cleanse your crystal during the full moon, and then you set a new intention with it during the. Wait, did I say that backwards? Hopefully I didn't. I'm trying to say cleanse during the full moon, and then and then set new intentions with the new moon. Look at me, confusing myself, not even able to get the words out. My God. That being said, crystals can soak up a lot of like unwanted energy during the process of like purging and releasing. So the new moon is a good time to like kind of reprogram and reset, especially if you were setting a lot of kind of detoxifying intentions during the full moon. Um, what else did I want to mention as it relates to the new moon? There was one other thing, and I don't remember what it was, but luckily we're approaching luckily we're approaching the last few minutes of our space, so there's no pressure on me. But there was something else I had in mind. Anywho, I'll pass the mic over to you, Abby, since I'm losing my mind over here.
I was following right along, and if you did say it incorrectly, I heard you correctly. So we're on the same wavelength as usual. But that's exactly what I kind of the same thing I follow. You're right. You don't see a lot of suggestions about working with crystals on the new moon, but that is exactly what I think you should. It makes sense to do. Not you should. I have to stop saying that. It makes sense to me to do the charging, the cleansing on that full moon, and then they're ready to go. So you can program them with those intentions, with those seeds that you're planting on the new moon. So I think that makes perfect sense. And I know we're coming close to the end, but I had in my notes and I forgot to mention when you were talking about being into wanting to be an astronaut as a kid. I about jumped out of my seat. I was in Young Astronauts Club in 6th grade. I love that we were both a couple of fucking nerds, and I was like so gonna be an astronaut until I realized the centrifugal force shit where they spin you around and around, and I can't even ride the teacups. So I love that we were both astronaut dropouts, but like metaphysical queens, like that we're destined to be friends. So I love it. We've been looking at that same full moon our whole lives, and here we are talking about it together. I just love that.
I am dying at astronaut dropouts. Like, I want that on a hoodie or like a t-shirt. Like, I didn't make it to be an astronaut, but I do have a crystal store, so that's hilarious. Oh, goodness gracious. Yes, I love it. I love how life just like aligns you with people who share similar interests and hobbies. Like, well, Web3 particularly, not life, NFTs and Web3 brought us together, and it's just been an incredible journey. And it's connected me with so many people I haven't even met in person yet, but I feel so close and so connected with, and like I share so many experiences and interests with. So I love that, and I could geek out about, everything Web3 has done for my social life a lot more, but we'll save that for another episode. And that being said, as we were talking, I was thinking like we should have an episode that's just about like creating a sacred space and like giving people ideas and tips on different ways you can curate and cultivate your own sacred space. Because we did like gently touch on that here, but I feel like that's a whole discussion in itself. What do you think about that?
I was thinking the same thing actually. There were a couple of things as we were talking today that I'm like, "Oh gosh, there's so many episode spin-offs that we could do from this one." But I completely agree and I think that would be a really useful and fun space to do. So, I'm down.
Well, I'm manifesting it. There's so many things I have on my list I want to talk. I also want to talk about finding peace in solitude. That's been on my mind a lot lately, and I know it's something that you super resonate with. Especially that I've been thinking about it a lot, because Valentine's Day just passed, and it is a time that people are. I'm married. It's a time that people are focused on their significant other, their relationship, and it's at the forefront. But it's also a time that many people are feeling lonely or sad or isolated. And I do feel like it would be incredible to talk about how you can find peace and power in solitude. And recently, when I took that trip to Arizona, I unexpectedly took it solo. And I was really frustrated at first when I found out I had to take the trip by myself. But then when I got out there, I was just like, wait, this is actually like really restorative. I'm actually really feeling like being by myself right now. So yes, I can't wait to talk about that too, Abby.
I'm so down. I think that is a great conversation. I've really been leaning into finding that. I love how you phrased that. Not just peace, but power in solitude. I think it sounds like we're mapping out March as we speak, but I'm down for all of the above.
Hallelujah. Well, this has been incredible. I absolutely love these spaces. I appreciate those of y'all who have hung out with us during this time too. I think we've had Tuesday and Stacy and John for almost the entire time. We've had Jenna for a good amount of time too, and Matt. So thank you for hanging out. Lots of love and good juju to you. If you enjoyed the conversation but joined late, we do record them so you can play it back on Twitter, or you can visit our YouTube where we upload them after the fact. If you want to come back and hang out with us next week, we do record this space every week. So just follow for updates. Sending lots of love and good juju out to each and every one of you. And we'll see you next week. Bye, y'all.